So the only um, comments that were at the last meeting were about the industrial area, and that's something that we had asked Bergman if they could give us alternatives. So you're on, Samantha.
Okay, great. Thank you, Oksana. Yes, so at the last meeting, we had just discussion about the industrial district overlay and what parcels that applied to. So if I could I did create a few maps to go over with everyone. So if I could just get sharing permissions so I can share my screen to show everyone, that would be fantastic. And we can go through these one by one. Okay. Okay. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So this is the updated zoning map that we have created. And one thing we had just talked about is making sure that the Canandaigua bus garage parcel is within the industrial overlay. And then we also had follow-up discussion about the parcels surrounding the bus garage itself. So we have two options that just wanted to go over with everybody. The first option would be to include the parcel that is immediately surrounding the bus garage in the industrial overlay. And then the second option would be, we had talked about splitting the parcels even north of that into the mixed use district, which you see, or excuse me, the mixed residential district that you see in yellow, and industrial, which would be on the southern half of those parcels. So I don't know if anybody wants to start off with their opinions on maybe which option they prefer, or whether we would just like to keep the bus garage parcel itself within the industrial overlay district, but here to open up for discussion at this point.
I have a general comment on that. I think when you hear the term industrial and overlay and that type of thing, that, you know, certain images come to mind. And for example, you know, going by Pactive, where you see the parking lots and everything, you know, close to the road. But I think with the form-based code, you know, that we're talking about, that it gives us an opportunity to really, you know, make that into something. Because basically you've got 332, which is a gateway, you know, coming in. I look at it differently, I guess. That's all I have to say.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hey, Samantha, the updated zoning map that you're showing, that parcel that surrounds the school bus garage is currently today zoned industrial. So option number one would be the current existing zone.
Okay, that is a good clarification. And so we can assume that option one is this base district model for the industrial overlay district. So maybe if folks have any opinion on whether they would like to split the difference between the mixed residential district and the industrial zoning overlay district, I believe the main concern there was buffering between the residential uses and industrial overlay. And one thing I would just like to mention is that we do have buffering requirements in the industrial overlay district to make sure that when an industrial district abuts a residential district, there are more stringent landscaping requirements between those two areas. So I don't know how folks feel, if they have a strong opinion one way or the other between maybe option one, which would be this base, keep the industrial districts as they are today, or to include the additional overlay district on those parcels to the north.
Doug, if we included what is shown right now, from Thomas Road to the industrial district shown, how much acreage is there, or how many, I don't know, feet, or no, it's got to be, it's not feet, yards, whatever. From Thomas Road, from the houses to where the blue would be.
Samantha, in your map, great question, Oksana. Give me a second here. I'll pull up Encore and I'll see if I can figure that out. But on your map there, Samantha,
Mhm.
I
Yep.
can't, and I don't know if, have you identified the property boundaries of the properties that are there so we could see, or is it not? I just can't see it from where I'm at. I don't know if it's on your map or not.
Oh, yeah, so,
Can you zoom in for us so we can see that?
yeah, let me see if I can.
Okay, so there. So you've got the white lines there, right? So
Correct.
you can see where there are some houses currently in those little boxes and those white lines. So you're talking about, it looks like half again as much property going back before you would hit that industrial overlay.
Right. So, I mean, so in that sliver behind the houses, would anything else be happening in there?
No, so those, I just measured it. Those houses, those house lots are about 200 feet deep is what I would say. And so you're talking probably another 200 feet that's currently farmed. It's currently row crops, essentially. But if you had industrial in the blue, let's hypothetically say that there's some sort of manufacturing or something in the blue, that yellow area, that plus or minus 200 feet would probably just lay fallow and grow up, I would think, and to be some sort of vegetative buffer.
Are you talking about those lots being split into two zoning districts, or having?
Yeah, so this option shows two parcels that would be divided that are currently zoned R130, those two gray ones, right?
So we'd be bisecting those in a sense too.
Right, to give it, so it wouldn't change the base zoning, right, Samantha? Well, at least not for the point of this conversation, but the overlay would expand into those parcels, right?
Correct, yeah, so the base, well, the base zoning district would be the mixed residential, this new district that we're creating with the mixed use, or excuse me, the industrial design overlay on top of that.
So would that degrade the value of those two parcels to the owner? I mean, that you got residential on Long Thomas Road, and then the back half of the those parcels are.
Terry, I think it's a great question, but I think, in my opinion, I think it would actually do the opposite. I think it would actually give them the ability to expand. When you talk about, we have such limited industrial space currently. And so when you're looking at any type of project, it's hard to locate a project just on one parcel. Usually it expands across multiple parcels. So to expand into that might give more flexibility for a larger project. Obviously, we wouldn't, it would have to be willing landowners. It would have to be willing sellers and everything else to take on a project, but it would give them a little bit more flexibility to look to do something. I think the concern that was brought up in the last meeting was the buffering with the current residential that's on Thomas Road.
Correct.
Well, we're not, odds are, we're not talking any kind of smokestack industry either. I mean, it's,
no,
with the space we have available, it's gonna be smaller, compact, people doing,
right,
most of the smokestack stuff.
Right, most of the inquiries that we get nowadays are more like technology driven, or even or a variety of different type of what I would call agricultural stuff. Even just recently had an inquiry about aquaponics, and is more non smokestacks type stuff.
Yeah. Well, Sarah and I did receive an email from Karen Parkhurst this morning, and she is in favor, even though she hasn't seen this map yet, but she is in favor of making the industrial district encompass as much land as possible. So she would agree with this map. Anybody else?
I would
I
agree
would
as
ag-
well.
Okay. And I agree with that, just as I said at the last meeting.
Okay, so we'll go with this
Okay.
then.
Okay, so was there anything else that people commented on at the last meeting that we need to decide?
I don't think, we didn't receive any comments from the committee other than what Karen had sent over. Basically, and it seemed as though she all the changes that we have made to both the mixed residential district and the industrial overlay district. The one change we had made, and everybody had seen this in the documents that Kimberly sent out last week, or maybe even 2 weeks ago, was that within the industrial overlay district, we did remove all of the building standard requirements and strengthen the site requirements, so not to impose on future industrial uses. But if there is no other comments or concerns regarding both of those districts, I think they are good to go.
So, and I'm sorry I haven't brought this up before now, but I keep thinking back and it kind of keeps gnawing at me, the PUD that we have there. So we're actually in this proposal that would actually rezone the land to a combination of the purple and the yellow being the mixed use and what it's the business, what's it called again?
Business park.
Business park, right?
Yep.
And rezone it from the planned unit development, the PUD that currently exists. I guess my question is, do we need to do it? Or should we just leave it alone?
I suppose you could just leave it alone. I mean, it's going to attract whoever it's going to attract. I mean, it's, you know.
Well, and to the best of my knowledge, you know, the current users and the current landowners have not had any issue with the existing planned unit development. And obviously, there's gonna be some, you know, the little parcel on 332 is currently listed for sale. It did just recently change hands. And from what I understand, the person that purchased it, they have plans for the, what I would say, the south half of that parcel closest to Thomas Road, and plan and actually have a concept of what they're going to be constructing. And they're trying to sell off the north half of that parcel. That parcel is divided by a high pressure gas line. And so the half of it, I'm talking about that that purple sliver piece on the map that's right there, exactly the one she's highlighting. The north half of that, the entrance would probably be in and off of Campus Drive to the traffic light that's a Campus Drive, and then the entrance on the south half would probably be onto Thomas Road, possibly onto 332, but more than likely onto Thomas Road. And then a lot of the rest of the yellow area is either Center Point Townhomes or Apartments or the golf course. And then Happy Tales just purchased the other big non-Acoustus parcel that's including primarily wetlands, that area off of Yerkes Road, to the south of Yerkes Road, and they have their plans. But I don't know of anything, and Shauna, jump in here, I think you're on the call. I don't know of anything in our existing zoning planned unit development that would preclude any of the stuff that is planned for all of that. And I'm wondering if it would just be simpler just to kind of leave it alone.
I think leaving it alone would be easier.
Doug, I'm sorry, why did you want to change it potentially? I couldn't follow.
just actually leaving it, just leaving it with the current, it's currently zoned planned unit development, which was done in the 80s, I think, or something or other. Yeah, and so just my question was maybe just leaving it alone instead of changing it to this, which I know is a little bit different, but we've got, originally, I think when we first started talking about this, and I'm sorry, Samantha, and I should have brought this to you ahead of time, but when we first started talking about this, we thought there was still opportunity to grow, and while there's still opportunity to grow, the parcels have now changed hands as such that I think we have an idea of what they're going to look like, and they're using the existing zoning that's there without any problem.
What are the allowed uses in the PUD?
So it's a
not
variety,
residential.
yeah, it's a variety of things. It's primarily commercial, a variety, but even like the residential piece, the apartments. So like at the corner of Brickyard and at the corner of Brickyard and Yerkes, Center Point, and John and I were just talking about this. We have to see if whether or not the approval's still good, but they have approval to build 144 apartments, additional apartments already. The townhome piece is already done. The golf course, you know, everything I know, the golf course is the golf course. It's just gonna exist. Acustos has their preliminary approval for their 8 new buildings that came with the property that they tell me that they plan to use, and Happy Tales wants to use that piece on 332 for their trails and their animal adoption center. So the only piece left is that sliver piece that is now changed hands, and right,
No point in doing anything really.
right,
It's pretty much all gone now,
yeah,
so just leave it.
Because that apartment was approved back in
yeah, quite a while ago. Yeah.
mid.
Yeah, we literally were just talking about that. We have to check the expiration on that.
So that corner Z-Bar I've been talking about, that's gone now, or?
They're who purchased it. So they plan to use the south half of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you see the for sale sign out there, but that's just for the north half of the parcel.
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, then, just leave it the way it is, the zoning.
So the only thing about that on this map, so if we take the orange dotted line that Samantha has on the outer perimeter and come down Thomas Road with it, and just cut that off and leave that alone, you're gonna have that sliver of yellow on the south side of Thomas, but maybe that's okay.
So would that purple sliver, is that what would change? I'm sorry.
It would be this whole
This whole thing.
block essentially would come out of the uptown zoning district. So all of the existing block would remain the same as today, which is the planned unit development. But these parcels down here would still be changed to the mixed residential. These
In the yellow.
in the yellow, yep, correct.
So why did we decide to divide those parcels south of Thomas Road between industrial and mixed use residential?
Because
Right where your cursor is.
Yep, so at the last meeting, that had been brought up as an option to sort of increase the buffering requirements between Thomas Road and the property to the south. So essentially this would expand the industrial overlay and provide more of that buffer between.
And I don't think that we agreed to that. I think we discussed it, but I don't think everyone agree. I certainly don't agree with having those parcels divided between industrial and residential.
well, we just agreed to it this morning, giving
From the
more.
residents that I've spoken to in that area, I would say that dividing those properties between industrial and residential is not something the residents of Thomas Road want. And it's not something that we should be doing. We should, if you want to expand it, you know, in the other parts, that's fine. But I think dividing those parcels is a bad idea. And I'm sorry that I was late due to a doctor's appointment that I talked to you about, Oksana.
Yeah, I understand. And I'm just telling you what our conversation has been this morning. Because the houses on Thomas Road, there's probably, we figured out 200 to 300 feet behind them. And that would give enough buffering. Because what else is going to happen in there? Nothing.
You said the same thing on County Road 10.
What was
I'm
that?
sorry, I don't remember about County Road 10.
I'm just saying, when we indicate that there is a wetland area that's not going to have development because it's wet, that doesn't necessarily happen. And that's, there's been a lot of development in a former wetland on County Road 10. So I don't,
Adeline, there's been no development in a wetland. There, we do not allow
Yeah.
development in a wetland. There's actually federal regulations. So there is the wetland.
I'm aware, yes.
Yeah, so there is no development. I can promise you there is no development in a wetland. Now you can do wetland delineation, and then you can do wetland mitigation, and you can actually create additional wetlands and those types of things, but that was not done in the case of County Road 10. The wetland was not touched.
My point is that if our argument is that there won't be development behind those houses on Thomas Road because the area is wet, I don't know if it's a wetland or not, but if the argument is that it won't be developed because it's wet, I don't think that that's a reason to put industrial development up against the back of residential development without a buffer area.
Yes, she said buffer. She never said wetland. There is no wetland to the best of my knowledge. I'm gonna double check that right now. But
No, there isn't. The wetlands
That's
are
what you had
on
indicated in the
campus.
last meeting.
Who indicated that?
Doug had indicated that that area was wet in the last meeting and that's why there wouldn't be development behind
No,
those
I
houses.
actually, just for clarification, I did not that spot. There's wetland up in the planned unit development area that we were just talking about, but
Okay.
not in that spot.
Okay. So we are dividing, you've decided to divide actual parcels then between their zoning.
It's not really rezoning though. It's an overlay district. It's not rezoning those parcels.
Doug, what is on that parcel? The two blue skinny areas. What are they farming it or what?
The area that, so the one thing is there's a large gas transmission line that crosses really the parcel that is closest to Brickyard Road. When you're talking about those two parcels, the parcel that's closest to Brickyard Road, generally looking at the aerial image right now, you would see that the gas line almost goes from one corner to the other and bisects the property. And obviously there's a pretty extensive easement around the gas line, so nothing can be built on that per se. The area that Samantha is showing in blue on parcel number 1, I would say is predominantly scrub brush. There are some pines in there. There are some trees in that area, but most of it is scrub brush is what I would call. The area that Samantha is showing in yellow on that first parcel that we're talking about closest to Brickyard Road is predominantly farmed currently, which is, and that's actually almost the dividing line there is where Samantha is showing that. The yellow portion is currently farmed. I think they had corn or wheat or something out there. And then the parcel number 2 that we're talking about, that is predominantly all farmed currently, and there is no gas line on parcel number 2. It crosses over into the next section. So pretty much where Samantha's cursor is there, the gas line is just to the south of that, and it runs at a diagonal. So like if you were to draw a line from the one corner to the other corner, it almost goes across that way, right? Like that. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering why we've gone with the blue division between the R and Brickyard and the M in summers. So that's my question. I have no issue with the area surrounding the bus garage there, but
Well, it would just give whatever business wants to build there, it would just give them a little bit more land. And it doesn't mean that we don't know what businesses would go in there, but it doesn't mean that they would build right up to the buffering area. So if somebody wanted to purchase the land around the bus garage, but needed a little bit more, then they could, you know, buy those other parcels, just to give them a little bit more room.
So let me ask a question. Let's dig into this just a little bit more for a quick second. So Samantha, the yellow, the mixed use, is that an overlay or is that changing the base zoning?
The yellow is the mixed residential, which was the new residential district that we created through this process. And I guess it's up for discussion, actually. So we had drawn these lines and the parcels we were going to change. I mean, currently in the zoning, I believe this is residential, but would be changing it to the residential district that we created. And this blue is not changing the base zoning, but would be changing or putting an overlay on top of that with additional design requirements, which I believe we talked about codifying into the code.
So can you go back to the map you showed a second ago? Or
Yep.
that one. Okay, so let's stick with this map for a second. So this is, if we said that the blue is industrial, that's what the base zoning currently is. And then if we said that the yellow, which you're saying mixed use residential, I think that area is currently maybe R130, but it's residential clearly currently.
Correct.
So that's what the existing zoning is today. So now think about this for a second, and I'll throw this out there. If you're a resident who lives on Thomas Road in one of those houses, if we change this base zoning on that yellow area to mixed use residential, I, as a developer, could put an apartment building behind your house.
Yep. Okay,
versus, and again, just bear with me a second now, if you could show me the other map, if this, because this is overlay, right? So blue is overlay. So if the industrial overlay is there, so the mixed use residential is the underlying zoning district at this point. And then the blue is an overlay on top of that, which would give the ability to expand a little bit into that parcel, but I could still do an apartment building behind your house because the base zoning is mixed use residential. So I think there's two questions is, you know, we talked about the overlay and that extending into that parcel a little bit, but is changing the base zoning to mixed use residential, and Adeline, I know you've just been out talking with a number of those residents, are they going to be okay with an apartment building behind their house? I guess is my question.
I mean, it's 14 houses. Why don't we ask them? I mean, it's a pretty significant change, so.
So then the other thing is, and I know I've heard this from time to time, right? And I have it even in my neighborhood. There's a farm field behind me. There's a farm field behind these houses. There's nothing to prevent a developer coming in today and doing conservation subdivision and putting more houses in behind these houses. I mean, the developer, you know, when you talk about property owners' rights, the existing property owners have the right to sell it for obviously development purposes. And so they have the ability to do that. The other thing I throw in there, and I know this is getting complicated, but the mixed use overlay exists already in this area. Does that go away with what we're proposing here? I guess is a question that I have.
Oh, wouldn't it?
I would think so, but it's a question. I would think it would go away, right?
I was thinking you have two,
Right, because
one overlay over the, you know, I mean, that's.
Right.
and the other ones, we replaced it with the form-based, so I
Right.
kind of thought that was the
Right.
intent.
I think these are all great questions, a great conversation, and I think for me, what it highlights is we're running into a situation where we have such limited industrial land, and you have an expansion of multifamily mixed-use residential, and you've got the two that are starting to run into each other. And to Adeline's point, you know, putting in buffering, and there are buffering requirements in other portions of the code and everything, but you know, what do we envision this looking like? And oh, by the way, there's an airport across the street that everybody complains about as more and more residential goes in.
Mhm.
Yeah. Actually, I just looked to the multiple residential district that currently exists does allow the apartment buildings. I think one of the major changes within the mixed residential district that we are proposing would allow those neighborhood commercial type.
Well, as I said earlier, I don't think we're talking about smokestack industries here. Anybody that's gonna locate in this area, given the constraints that are there, it's really not all that much property. They're gonna be smaller compact businesses of a technology nature or, you know, something that's a cleaner type of industry, so.
Yeah, it probably wouldn't be like another package.
Is, you know, probably sufficient to cut off any view from the houses that are on Thomas Road. Plus, anything that we do here is gonna be subject to a public hearing, so if people have problems with it, they can come and voice them and, you know, always make a change, so.
Yeah, if there was another business, it probably wouldn't be another active type thing. It's the smaller businesses, which are already there now to begin with.
Yeah.
You know, they're, you know, hopefully they don't go away, you know, but at least this way, I feel like this puts a period at the end of the sentence because this is already what it kind of is today. You know, if you drive down Brickyard, you know, picture what you see. All the way from Brickyard to Thomas, then Thomas to the other side, you know, to Yerkes. I don't know. I feel like this is just, this is kind of what's been developing into. This is where it's been going. So we're just drawing some lines, literally and figuratively.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're talking about a hypothetical, right? I think one of the things that I'm also curious about is, again, if let's say that there was some sort of technology business that wants to do light manufacturing, because that's essentially all you get nowadays, that locates next to the school bus garage, and they need some of that land of one of those two parcels, and they buy that from the landowner, that actually makes those other two parcels probably less desirable for a developer doing an apartment project, and they're probably more likely to remain fallow and just grow up into shrub brush versus actually the entirety of the parcels being able to be used for, like, for instance, an apartment building. It's really whatever you guys are looking for. We just make it the.
Well, that one parcel with the gas line kind of bisecting it.
It's limited, right?
It's very limited.
Right.
So, I mean, nothing's gonna go in there.
Right.
Industrial or residential, right. So. It's really the other parcel that would come into play.
I understand all of that. My point is just simply, there's a very small number of houses on that side of Thomas Road. If we can explain all this to them, I don't see why we don't at least explain it all to them and make sure that they're aware of what's going on and that it works for the residents as well.
Yeah. And I will just throw out there again that this overlay would not be allowing, like, it wouldn't change the uses on the lower half of those parcels. It's just providing more design standards for industrial uses for essentially this parcel here. So I don't think any industrial uses would be any closer to homes as they exist today.
But I guess I go back to, we're talking a lot about the industrial. My personal opinion is that's not the bigger issue. The bigger issue is whether or not we change the existing zoning to mixed use residential. You're talking about changing R130 where you can have a single family home to mixed use residential, that I can build an apartment building behind one of those houses. Don't miss that.
Mhm.
And small.
No, I think the existing zoning district is multiple residents.
It's, let me just look, well, it's in the mixed use overlay, but it's gray. Gray, yeah, it's R130 residential, single family residential.
Okay.
I think, one of the reasons it's proposed as potentially the mixed residential district is, I remember when we were doing the Uptown study back a few years ago, and Kimberly and you, Sam, were talking about potential visions for Uptown. I do remember that this northwest corner of the Uptown area, that I think there was a general consensus that residential was good, but maybe more dense, to go with the whole idea of Uptown being a place where we can invite more dense residential. So I think that's why I remember we kind of were going in this direction.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Just a question. This is Bob Taylor. There is no single family, R1 districts in any of the proposals for this area, correct?
Not in this district.
In the proposal, no. In the existing base zoning, yes.
Yep.
And my other question was the distance between those housing lots and the proposed overlay district is, do you know how many feet that is?
I was just trying to look at that on Encore, basing it on the lot size. She zoomed in at the beginning of the meeting on this, and we were looking at the lots that are there are about 200 feet deep. And so it looks like it's another 300 to 400 feet. So it's again, the same entire size of the lot plus between the back of their lot and then that blue line.
Yeah, 300 to 400.
Yeah.
And the point was made that an industrial building could actually not be built on that purple section because of setback requirements. Did I hear that?
Because of the base zoning would remain residential.
So how does it advantage? What's the advantage of that? Of having it as an overlay, industrial overlay?
I think the advantage that we were trying to impose was providing more buffering requirements between the industrial district and the residential uses.
Okay, right. I don't understand how that works, but I'm just not seeing how it differentiates what's built on that person. If it remains residential, even though it's in an industrial overlay, what changed in terms of the use of that parcel?
The uses wouldn't change. Uses would remain the same.
And what's the point? What's the point of the overlay? I'm missing this.
The overlay has specific design requirements for site design for industrial uses. And what we have written into the overlay district is buffering requirements for the entire overlay district, but also more stringent landscaping buffering requirements when it abuts a residential district. So this was a concept that was brought up at the last meeting. And here it's open for discussion if we wanted to extend it. It could remain the same as shown in this option, or we could extend the overlay northward.
The only real purpose is to give a little bit more area for industrial development. That's the fundamental reason for, bisecting those two parcels.
It's to give more flexibility, right?
Yeah,
So
I
it
mean, it
doesn't
gives
say
you-
that it would happen, it just,
Because you look at that, where that bus garage is, that area surrounding the bus garage is just such a strange configuration. It gives a little more depth for somebody on either side of the bus garage. And it's hard to believe anybody's gonna build anything that's gonna wrap around the bus garage property. It's just an odd configuration.
But I thought I heard that the overlay still, it remains residential. Even though it's an overlay, that's what's confusing to me. You couldn't build an industrial facility on that added overlay. Did I mishear that?
So I think, Samantha, what Bob's trying to ask is on, for instance, parcel number 1, you can't because of the gas line, but in the option number 2, right, could you locate a manufacturing facility where your cursor is?
Not unless we change the base zoning to industrial on this parcel.
Now,
So-
go back to the option you had a second ago, so let me just ask this real quick. So hypothetically, in this scenario, the yellow, let's pretend that I've bought all that and I've built apartment buildings in the yellow, right up against the blue. And then a manufacturing industry facility wants to come in and build whatever. Do they have to put the buffering requirements if my apartment project is already there?
If somebody was locating here, would they have to use buffering requirements? Yes.
So it further restricts that parcel.
So yeah, so there would be more buffering from like here to here.
Which makes that parcel less buildable.
So putting the overlay into the southern, doing that would allow that property owner of the area around the bus garage to not have to do quite as much buffering and still be able to.
Yeah, the buffering could actually be on that, where the cursor is.
I think I understand it. I think I was with you, Bob Taylor. I was a little bit confused on that too. Sam, is that what I just said? Is that accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
I think I understand.
So basically, we're trying to make it where somebody can build industrial right on the corner there, sort of in line with the R of Summers in the blue. And then have the buffering just over on the other side of that line between them and the residential, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so that I understand then. It's not
That's
changing the base
reality.
zoning. It's not changing the base zoning. It's just allowing essentially the requirements of building there to go into the buffering area on the other side of that makes more sense. My main problem would be if you're putting, a large industrial development, which by nature, we make limited requirements on industrial developments. My biggest problem would be if that was on the other side of that line. But if we're talking about not allowing the development on the other side of that line, just using that as the overlay for the existing, that makes perfect sense then. So now that I get it, I'm good with that. I don't know how everyone else is feeling on it. But.
Okay. So where do we go from here?
Well, can I ask a question? Sorry, I keep driving this point
Go
home. I
ahead.
just want to make sure you guys understand this.
Quick while you're ahead.
Are you guys okay with me building an apartment building on the yellow behind those houses on Thomas Road? Because that's what you're telling me right now. That's the direction that I'm getting from this conversation. You're good with me putting in 20 apartment buildings? I just want to make sure everybody's good with that.
Well, that's a hypothetical.
It is a hypothetical, but
And
worst case scenario hypothetical.
yeah, but when you consider probability, I think that's extremely low.
Candlewood put apartments around a gas line.
I just want to be sure that everybody understands that's essentially what we're saying is we would allow mixed use residential development, that
Yeah.
yellow area, and what that could be townhomes,
And
it could be
small-scale
anything.
commercial.
Right.
It was
What
designed like
what
Main
is it now? It's not
It's
not
R130
mixed use
currently.
residential now.
No, it's single.
This is
family.
So we're
currently
talking about
single
changing
family.
that.
Yeah,
And the
these
other
are
side is
current-
mixed use.
Yeah, so these are currently single family. In the Uptown study, we had talked about potentially allowing for denser residential development, which is why we changed these parcels to mixed residential, the new district that we created.
How large is that second lot going to the east of those two on Thomas Road?
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I'll look it up.
I've got it here, or we'll have it.
The one that her cursor's on?
This
Yeah.
one,
Got one.
so this is the entire parcel. I don't know how large that is.
It's 23 acres.
Okay.
What's the height restriction there, given the proximity to the airport?
So it's about 1,000 feet deep.
1,000 feet deep.
Okay.
The airport, that's not in the direct flight path, so it's just whatever the zone, whatever the height restriction is with the zoning.
25 feet or 30 feet.
Samantha, what is the proposal? Is it
Excuse me.
35?
For which, I'm sorry.
The mixed use, the height risk limitation.
Let me see. We have 45 feet for apartment buildings.
Didn't we figure out that was basically what the hammocks were? Isn't that how we figured out how
Correct.
tall that was? So
That's correct. And I'd like to just throw out there that just thinking about this a little bit more, if we were to expand the industrial overlay, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm derailing this whole conversation. If we were to expand the industrial overlay, we would have to change the base zoning for these two parcels. So I guess the conversation or the options are whether, if we're taking out the PUD and leaving that, or if we're leaving the PUD as is along the northern side of Thomas Road, do we want to maintain the mixed residential district for these parcels and expand the industrial district as well? So it sounds like some of the conversation that Doug is bringing up, or the concerns that Doug is bringing up, is whether we should even change these to mixed residential, or should it just remain single family as it exists today?
Excuse me, I'm not part of this committee, but coming up Brickyard Road, I can just see single family homes there. I'm really not all that in favor of apartment buildings going there, especially given the fact that Centerpoint, I can't remember the number that Doug brought up, but something like 140 apartments there. They're cleared. How many? Other cleared the bill. So that's my comment.
And I guess my understanding was if we were going to want to be pulling in larger scale apartment buildings, we were hoping to pull them over near Fire Hall Road to that mixed use residential area. And I feel like this zoning is almost incentivized in a way. And I don't know. I think it makes sense in the Fire Hall area, which is a much more walkable area to the grocery store and to commercial areas than it is. That corner of Thomas and Brickyard is essentially almost rural at this point. I can't say that I'm terribly in favor of having that be a mixed use residential area at this point either.
So keep in mind, we do have currently what I would call two concepts for these parcels that we're spending a lot of time talking about, right? So one concept that we have involves the landowners of the parcel currently advancing a mixed use, large, extremely large townhome, apartment, variety of other things. And they submitted concept 6 months ago that may or may not move forward. There's another concept that more recently has been advanced involving what I would call light manufacturing that doesn't actually have concept, but there's been conversation about it. That's primarily on the parcel adjacent to the school bus garage, but bleeds into those other two parcels a little bit, not much, but a little bit, still advancing the opportunity for a buffer. So I think really one of the things that this group needs to make a recommendation for is what you envision this to be. I mean, traditionally, if we were dealing with a blank canvas, right, from a basic planning perspective, you don't want residential up against industrial. You want some sort of buffering, right? But we're dealing not with a blank canvas. We have homes that were built at some point in time, and we have industrial areas that are developing. And I think one of the things that we're dealing with is we don't have a lot of industrial space. And as there's a need for considering industrial, you know, whether or not this is the right area. I mean, basically, essentially what we have right now is between North Road and Airport Road is our industrial pocket, right? Essentially. But to the north of Airport Road, it's this mixture of, you've got the school bus garage, you've got a couple of manufacturing facilities down at the corner of Brickyard and Airport, and then you have vacant land currently that all of a sudden is getting a lot of interest as there's more and more needs, right? So what would you like to see? Ideally, I mean, this kind of goes back to the basic visioning concept of what would you like to see there? Are you okay with the multifamily residential, or would you like to see more single family residential or industrial? Or, you know, a lot of times what you do from when you're starting with a blank canvas is you try to put like light commercial as a buffer, almost like a neighborhood commercial next to a residential before you transition to an industrial. What do you guys kind of want to see there? You know, truthfully, the residents, if I was a resident that lived on Thomas Road, I also wouldn't be very excited about having 300 or 400 townhomes behind me instead of a farm field, but that's what the property owner currently has the right to do, and that's one of the concepts that they advance. So, but you kind of got to give some vision so we know what to zone it.
And not just what do we want to see, but maybe what's the greater need?
Mm-hmm. But to Adeline's point, and I 100% agree, the form-based code area is where I think we would want, my opinion is where we want the most dense residential components over there. And kudos to the developers that I'm working with, looking at the form-based code, they're getting very creative in being able to design buildings that have flex space on the first floor and even more dense residential on floor 2, 3, maybe floor 4. You know, so they're already looking at those areas, which may lessen the demand on these areas a little bit, right? But again, we still need to figure out what to do with this. I mean, and again, even if we did nothing and just leave it the way it is, those two big parcels that we're talking about there, currently zoned R130, there are restrictions because of the sanitary sewer. So there's a variety of different factors. You know, maybe the easy thing is do nothing, truthfully.
When we agreed
I'll stay
earlier-
quiet now.
When we agreed earlier on option 2, what was that? I totally forgot that.
This option 2.
Yeah.
So I did misspeak earlier. So option 2 would be splitting these parcels and applying industrial. It would be industrial use and industrial overlay to these parcels.
You extend that industrial overlay through those two pieces that are identified there now, you don't really have to change the base zoning. We have other overlay districts that somebody can ask the town board to use, you know, the mixed use overlay, but the base zoning is still there. You don't have to change it in those areas. So you could do this without changing any zoning. So,
Mixed use overlay doesn't go over onto those.
no, I'm saying other areas. I'm just saying other,
Oh, not on this.
It was extended. The overlay was extended.
yeah, over on the east side. I mean, we have, you know, but we don't change the zoning just because there's an overlay. The overlay is just
Right.
a potential possible method to do something different.
Right. Well, and that gets back to Samantha, and I'm not sure I even understand this concept of the industrial overlay. Like the parcel that surrounds the school bus garage is already zoned industrial. What's the
Correct.
point of having the industrial overlay over top of the industrial?
So the industrial overlay would provide those additional design requirements for landscaping, for all of the site parking, lighting requirements that we drafted up.
Similar to the form-based code, but not the same as that one.
Correct. Yeah. So it'd just be a second set of, aesthetic requirements for industrial uses.
Because they're not already in the industry, I mean, it is a good question, overlay district over something that's already called the same thing.
Right, it would be more design criteria essentially for the industrial in the industrial area.
Why don't we have those included already in our industrial area?
But yeah, I mean,
We just don't.
I have a question about how we would apply this, and that with a mixed use overlay, it's a town board decision. With, say, the industrial overlay, how is that enforced? Is that at the applicant's discretion, or is it automatically placed on top and it's used without extra approvals? How would we enforce
So
it?
there are options. I believe
Okay.
through this process, we have talked about codifying these design standards so that
Okay.
they would have to be conformed with. If they were design guidelines, they do not have to be codified in the code, but would be at the discretion of a developer to use them.
I thought we had essentially said we should make minor requirements. We would do better having small requirements codified rather than large recommendations in the plan.
Correct. So last meeting, we had talked about removing all of the building standards, which some of which we also have in the form-based code district they're different, but for the form-based code district, we have building design requirements for setbacks, for different architectural features, or where buildings need to be stepped back, or there needs to be a separation between facade types, things. Currently, because we didn't want to impose too many restrictions on industrial developers or businesses, companies, we had removed those building side components but still retained the site design requirements. And those could either still be codified within the code or just use as general guidelines for industrial companies, developers to follow at their discretion.
I know when we originally did the Uptown feasibility study, we included this area, but I'm really starting to wonder if we need any of this, or if we just leave the existing zoning the way it is. Form-based code and let form-based code do its thing. It's working. We're getting a lot of interest and everything. And I truthfully wonder if we need to do anything in this other area. The biggest thing it would be, if you want certain development standards for the industrial area, I think that's essentially what I'm getting from this conversation with Samantha. That's what this is offering. Or just leave it.
Hey, Doug, I hate doing this, but at this point, you're making really good points, good questions. It's almost, we might just need to get together in a room and meet face to face with everyone. And that maybe will help us get going where we want to go, whether it's leaving it the way it is or making these changes, but I don't know.
What about, and this is just a small point, but last night we had a meeting about the Auburn Trail, and we are, talking about bringing it down Brickyard Road. And I wouldn't want to suggest that you change zoning to make people happy when they're going for a walk, but we are, by putting the Auburn Trail in, or proposing to put it in, inviting a lot of people to be walking through here. Does that matter? Do we want our industrial area to be pleasing to look at? Do we care? Do we not care? question, not a suggestion.
I was thinking about that too after last night's meeting as well. And I think, again, what we had talked about in the last meeting is that with this industrial area, we had all kind of agreed the most important part wasn't necessarily what the buildings looked like, but what was rather the buffering around those buildings. And I know as you walk the trails through Victor, a good portion of them, School Street area, for example, is through industrial zones. But there's extensive buffering, which creates both a work environment where you have an opportunity for outdoor recreation and a positive use of essentially less attractive land because it's in an industrial zone. So I think as long as our buffering is good. I mean, for me, that's the most important thing about this industrial area is the buffering around the industrial area. So I think that's, if we are making a change, I think requiring significant buffering is the most important change to be making in this area. And beyond that, I think we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is pulling and pushing large scale development to the areas that we've already discussed on the other in the form-based code area.
Just for point of reference too, this area for the Auburn Trail will actually be on the airport property. So it'll be on the other side of the road. It won't go through this. There
Not
is,
through it, but
we've
yeah.
always talked about a potential connection point of Thomas going down the gas line over to Blue Heron Park. You know, the gas company is not super thrilled about that. That's a battle we'll have to deal with at some point in time in the future, but you know.
Or along maybe Airport Road, there was talk about that too, maybe.
Well, just leave the Thomas Road parcels the same zoning as it exists today and not apply any of the industrial overlay district, or where would we like to go from here?
I don't hear consensus on doing anything. We need more time.
I think we've talked ourselves out of the whole thing.
Well, I don't think we talked ourselves out of it, but it sounds
Yeah, we
like there's
did.
enough different opinions that it's, I don't know if we've made a decision today.
Well, the last thing I heard was leave it alone, don't change anything.
That's what I heard. Okay. Okay. Well, I know my direction to move forward would be at least to change the boundary and leave this block existing as it is today, the PUD. And then I suppose if we wanted to schedule another meeting, we can talk about these parcels again, or we can just remove these Thomas Road parcels, change the boundary to go below those residential parcels as they are today, single family residential, and then we could leave it up to the town and the committee whether they would like to codify or not codify the industrial design overlay standards too. But the town would have them to use at any point, and I guess it would be a decision for the town to just move forward with or not.
Would it make any sense to take those additions that would be in the overlay district and incorporate them into our industrial? I mean, you know, that seemed to be the advantage of the overlay district, was it would impose more
Landscaping and design.
landscaping and those things. Should we just put that into the industrial anyway? Be done with it?
I think so. And in terms of enforcement in our end, it's just much easier when we have it in the code versus a suggestion. Developers are generally amicable, but it's a lot easier, and I think it just goes over better when it's in the code.
Well, I think to Samantha's point, right, we hired them to look at this area and give us stuff, which they're obviously giving us a lot to talk about. They can give us all the information, and then this committee could decide, essentially, I guess is where I would see this going, whether or not to take those pieces that are in the industrial overlay and actually incorporate those into our industrial zoning without maybe doing anything else with the actual rezoning of these properties or overlays or anything else.
Where are we currently base zoned industrial? Is that end at Airport Road or?
No, it's everything in that blue. It's this map, Adeline. Everything
Okay.
in blue is already zoned industrial.
Okay.
But not all of that land is available because
Correct.
you have to take pactive in consideration and, you know, some of the other
Right.
businesses.
Pretty much, with the exception of the one parcel that bisects Airport Road, everything between Airport Road and North Road is already owned by Pactiv. So, 80% of this plus is probably not available.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time talking about 20%.
Right.
So if we extended the industrial, wouldn't that give more protection to those houses along Thomas Road?
That's what I was wondering too, because I know we talked about, like, do you want apartments to go back there? But that might be tricky to pull off if the industrial's expanded. I'm not saying it can't happen, I just said it might be tricky.
Well, is it single family residential there now? That's what I thought we had said. It's single, so
It
they
would be
can't
single
have
family, okay.
apartments. Right,
it wouldn't be an issue.
currently, only if we added the multiple, well, the other overlay, right? So right now it's single family.
So it's currently R130, but it has the mixed use overlay on it, which is how
Okay.
we ended up with that concept of all of those townhomes and stuff. So it sounds like to me, there's got to be some decision ultimately made here by the board, but there's got to be recommendations to go into the town board. But whether or not those two parcels should still continue to have the mixed use overlay on them, should they be R130 or should they be rezoned to mixed use residential like proposed here, there's got to be some decisions made here.
Why wouldn't we keep those R130 and then extend the industrial a little further up so that, I mean, I obviously don't like to do an R130 next to an industrial, but if we've got our significant codified industrial buffering in there and it's R130, then you're not going to have large development back in there other than the industrial beyond the buffering.
And the buffering itself would be on those extensions.
Yes.
I'd go with that.
I think it would protect those homeowners.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives them more protection, really.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is leave these single family residential, but extend the industrial district to where it is shown on this map.
As long as they're not is it a multiple? It's not a multiple user. What's the thing that allows apartments?
So currently on this map, the yellow is mixed residential, which would
Mixed residential, thank you.
apartments and like the small scale commercial uses. But it sounds as though from this conversation, we want to leave that zoned as it is.
And single family homes.
Okay. And
However, to really complicate things, so it is the base zoning today is R130 with mixed use overlay on top of it. Again, still, I could petition the board and build an apartment building if the town board approved it. That's the giant asterisk on that, right?
Or we could carve
So
that
can't-
out of the mixed use overlay.
Yeah, or just take off.
Take it out.
I mean, seriously, we could probably, now that we have the form-based code in place, we could probably just eliminate the mixed use overlay in its entirety for all of of this whole area of number one. I mean, there's only, Sean and I were looking at it, there's only a few pieces
like
left
two.
that have the mixed use overlay anyway, right?
Right.
So then it would
And-
eliminate that problem also.
Take it
Yeah.
away,
Mhm.
get rid of it.
Let's do that.
I would agree.
Okay. Well, Samantha, you have your marching orders.
I do. Okay, yes, and I can redraw these maps, send out additional documents to the committee, and if we feel Kimberly and I should hop on another meeting with the Economic Development Committee, we are happy to do that to walk over any last minute changes.
Okay. Sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you
That
so
was a
much.
good conversation and everyone's opinions count.
Absolutely.
So thank you, everyone.
All right, you have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.
Right.